In battle with Kai Vorin, the first sword of the Empire of the Sun, none of those who dared to raise a weapon against him survived. Neither knights, nor generals, nor forest mercenaries with poisoned blades. He stood above them all like a mountain above a plain, just as inevitable, just as indifferent to others' efforts. That was exactly why he was killed differently. Wine with a slow poison. Good wine, it must be said, aged in the proper glass, served by a servant whom Kai had trusted for 8 years. He realized he was dying when he rose from bed and saw his fingers trembling slightly for the first time in 30 years. Trembling. So that was it. He sat by the window, threw a cloak over his undershirt, and watched the city until dawn came. Outside the window, the capital was waking. Merchants were opening shops. Children were running somewhere with shouts. Guards were changing at the southern gate with yawns and the clinking of steel. An ordinary morning. Kai held the sword on his knees. He thought about who had done it, and it did not take much time. The list of those who wanted him dead was short only because most of those who had wanted it had already found their place in the ground. But some had survived. Those who had not risked fighting openly, but smiled at feasts and poured wine. The commander of the Western armies, Doran Hell, Lord Advisor Merrick Senator, and someone else above them. The one who feared not Kai's strength, but his reputation. A man whom swords obey cannot be left alive when you want to create your own state. Kai smirked. So they had finally decided. Well then, he ran a finger along the blade without cutting himself, simply feeling the metal, and felt the poison continuing its work. Slowly, but unstoppably. Such a thing cannot be healed. Everyone who studied the craft of death as thoroughly as he studied the craft of war knows that. He closed his eyes. The last thing he saw was the rising sun, coloring the city roofs orange. The last thing he thought about was that he should have killed Doran about 5 years ago. And then darkness. The first thing Kai Vorin felt in his second life was the smell of pine needles. Sharp, clean, alive. He was lying on the ground, and the ground was cold, damp after the night rain, and through the crowns of the trees above him the morning gray sky could be seen. He blinked, tried to sit up. The body was strange. Too light. Too small. He looked at his hands. They were someone else's. Young. Without scars. Without the hardened skin that appears from many years of holding a hilt. Without knotted joints and rough calluses. Just hands. Clean. Young. Unfamiliar. What the? The voice was different too. Higher than he was used to. Kai got up, holding onto the trunk of a tree, and understood several things at once. First, he was alive, although he had been dead. Second, the body in which he was alive was young. 17 years old, no more. Third, he was standing in an unfamiliar forest without a weapon, without landmarks, and without understanding what had happened at all. He found the nearest stream by sound. Automatically, it was the first reflex hammered into him back in childhood, and looked at his reflection. An unfamiliar face. Dark hair. Angular features. Sharp eyes. Looking from the water with an expression that did not match the age of the body at all. Too adult. Too calm. He picked up a flat stone from the bank. Took it with 2 fingers. Felt the weight. Calculated the trajectory. Threw it. The stone passed a centimeter from a branch on the other bank. He snorted. The reflexes were dulled. That is logical. The new body does not yet know what he knew. Muscle memory is absent. Strength is much lower than what he was used to. But the most important thing remained. He felt the inner flow. That very power which in his time was called the blade spirit, not magic in the usual sense, but something deeper. Understanding of space, movement, trajectory. The ability to read an opponent's body before the opponent himself understands his next action. A fighter's instinct brought to such a level that battle turns not into a physical process, but into something between breathing and thinking. He had not lost it. The spirit remained the same. It simply now lived in a body that did not yet know what it was capable of. Kai slowly crouched by the stream, put his hands on his knees, and for several minutes simply listened to the forest. 100 years. The world changed in 100 years. He felt it in the smell of the air, in the unfamiliar kinds of trees at the edge of the clearing, in a distant sound that was like the ringing of metal, but different from before. A new era. New people. His traitors had long been dead, but he himself was not. Kai stood up, straightened his shoulders, and for the first time in many years felt something that in his past life had been more an exception than a rule. Interest. Kai had been walking for 3 hours when he smelled smoke. Not pine smoke, not cooking smoke. Acrid, with a taste of burned leather equipment and resin. That is how the fires of people who live in the forest without permission and without the desire to be found smell. He walked more quietly. Not because he was afraid. He simply wanted to see before being seen. That was also a reflex. One of those that do not disappear. The camp opened from the top of a gentle slope. Large, poorly organized, but clearly working. 7 or 8 large tents, 2 carts with barred wagons covered over, and 1 open campfire. People around. About 25 people, maybe 30. Armed unevenly. Swords, axes, several crossbows. One guy by the far cart was holding a spear, clearly not understanding how it was done properly. Not an army. Bandits. The kind who call themselves free traders when direct questions are asked. Kai looked at the wagons. There were people in the barred bodies. Women. Several. One male teenager in the corner, hunched up as if trying to become as small as possible. 2 more by another cart. All in chains, not heavy shackles, but linking chains specifically, which allow walking on foot but restrict the freedom of the hands. Slave traders. He was in no hurry to draw conclusions. That did not mean he hesitated. A good warrior simply never begins to act without a clear understanding of the whole picture. He began to count. 28 people in the camp. 4 on watch around the perimeter. 2 by the wagons. 1, clearly the senior, fat, in a leather jacket with patches, was sitting by the fire and eating something straight from the pot without a spoon. He had a sword. A good one, by the way. Not stolen, but real, with a ring guard. Of the prisoners, 12 people. Possibly 13, if someone was lying at the far end of the wagon. Kai looked at his hands. The body was young. Strength for now. But the reflexes had already begun to awaken, even without training. The inner flow was stable. The question was one: why get involved? He could go around the camp. That would be smart. That would be logical. He had just been reborn, did not know where he was, did not know the current structure of the world and the political map, had neither weapon, nor money, nor name. The rational decision was to go around. Kai looked at the girl in the far corner of the wagon. She was holding someone's hand. A child, it seemed. He looked at it for a few more seconds. Then he rose from his crouch, straightened his shoulders, and went down the slope. Rationality is a good thing, but he had never been a strictly rational person. Kai entered the camp from the side of the watchman. The watchman was standing by a tree, looking the other way and chewing something. Kai came right up to him before he managed to turn around. "Give me your knife." The watchman turned around with an expression of sincere confusion. "What? The knife? On your belt. Who are you anyway?" "A man who needs a knife." A pause 2 seconds long. Then the watchman decided that before him was simply a young idiot who had gotten lost in the forest and reached for him with the clear intention not of giving the knife, but of grabbing him and dragging him to the senior. Kai acted first. The movement was one, short, without unnecessary details, a grip on the wrist, a turn, a palm strike to the base of the neck. The watchman fell without managing to make a sound. Kai took the knife from his belt, not bad, by the way, thick blade, good steel, and a short sword in a sheath. A sword. He held it in his hand for a couple of seconds. The first sword in the new body. Cheap, with a scratch on the blade and a loose hilt. But it was a sword, not a knife, and that was already a different conversation. He put it into the sheath and moved toward the camp. The next few minutes were very noisy. Kai later, much later, when his head became a little cooler, tried to restore the sequence, but it stuck together into one single, fast, almost meditative flow. The second watchman. The third. A swift sweep around the perimeter while those in the center of the camp were still eating and drinking. Then someone finally noticed. Someone shouted. And everything went differently. 25 people against one 17-year-old body with a cheap sword is, by any calculation, a catastrophe. By any calculation that does not take into account that inside this body are 30 years of experience of the most dangerous warrior in the history of the Empire. They rushed at him all at once, which in itself was already a mistake. The first rule of fighting against numerical superiority is space. One who stands alone against many must always be able to move. Those who attack as a crowd create a problem for themselves. They get in each other's way, narrow the angles, block their own strikes. Kai used this. Not elegantly. The body was unfamiliar, and several times he felt that the reflex had worked, but the muscles had not kept up with the command. He received a blow to the ribs from a bandit with an axe, missed a glancing hit on the forearm. But he moved. Constantly. Angles, turns, using opponents as shields from one another, strikes at points that break the will before they break the body. Knee, wrist, throat, not to death, just to switch off. A strike with the hilt to the temple. A sweep. Movement again. He broke the cheap sword on the third opponent, threw it at the head of another, then took someone else's. The leader with the ring guard came out last. He was more experienced than the others. That was immediately visible from his stance. A wide base. He held the sword without twitching, waiting. "Who are you?" he asked. "A passerby. A passerby." He looked at the bodies of his people around. Alive, most of them, but taken out of action. With such training? A good life. The leader attacked. He struck strongly, technically, with good use of the body. Kai parried 3 strikes cleanly, went around the 4th from the side and struck the thigh, flat, near the joint. He did not kill him. The leader fell to one knee, dropped the sword, and grabbed his leg. Kai placed the blade at his throat. The keys to the chains. He looked at him from below with the expression of a man trying to understand what had just happened. The keys. He slowly took a bunch from inside his clothes. Kai took it without moving the sword away. "Now you can leave. All the equipment, money, carts stay. This. Leave. This is the only offer." There were 13 prisoners. 8 women, 2 teenage girls, 2 men, and 1 boy about 10 years old. Kai opened the locks one by one, silently. They looked at him, some with fear, some with cautious hope, some with an expression of "I still do not believe this is really happening." The last lock he opened was that of the young woman who sat in the far corner of the second wagon, the very one he had noticed from the hill. She was pressing a girl of about 6 to herself. When the chain fell, she did not rush to run. She raised her gaze. "Who are you?" she asked. Her voice was even. "Despite everything. Not important for now. Important. Because you just killed." "No, did not kill. Took down more than 20 people. Alone. 28. Alone. In a body that is not yet 20 years old." He looked at her more attentively. Smart. Observant. Holding herself together. "Get out," he said. "It is getting cold." She got out, placed the girl on the ground beside herself, looked around at the other prisoners, and this was unexpectedly calm, said, "Gather by the big fire." Everyone. And the others obeyed. Interesting, Kai thought. They settled by the fire. Someone found food in the camp supplies. The boy was crying quietly, and one of the women held him by the shoulders. 2 men, one with a split lip, the other with an arm in a sling, stood a little to the side and watched Kai with cautious respect. The woman with the girl sat opposite him. "My name is Lyra," she said. "I used to be a trader." "Used to be?" "We were taken 3 weeks ago." She did not go into details. She simply gave information. "The route went south. I think to the gray market." "Do you know it?" "No." She was slightly surprised. "The largest slave market beyond Raven Ridge. There we would have been sold through." She stopped. "It no longer matters. You got us out." Kai silently stirred the coals with a rod. "We need to leave here before morning," he said. "If these people have a senior, he will send others." "They do." Lyra nodded. "They spoke about a master. Some Shrek from Targan. A slave trader, mainly acts through intermediaries." "Targan is?" She looked at him again with slight astonishment. "A city, 2 days' journey to the north. The main trading hub of the province of the summit limit." He remembered. "Then we are not going north." Before dawn, they were still sitting by the dying fire. Most of the prisoners were dozing. Exhaustion had taken its toll. Only Kai, Lyra, and the 2 men were still on their feet. The first, tall, with a broken nose and a blacksmith's hands, introduced himself as Horace, a former mercenary, lately a guard of a trade caravan. He had been taken together with the others during an attack on the convoy. The second, thinner, with sharp eyes, was Selt, a former clerk and accountant in some provincial administration. He did not explain how he had ended up with the slave traders, but from the hints it was clear that he had witnessed something unnecessary. "You gave us life," Horace said directly. "That is a debt." "No debt," Kai answered. "It was my choice, not yours." Still, he was not going to back down. "Where are you going?" "I do not know yet." "You are lying." Kai looked at him. "Fine. I know approximately. But that is my business. You have no money, no food, No base, Selt said calmly. No equipment. No name in these places. I have lived long enough to know, one person, however strong he may be, will not get far without support. Kai was silent. That was true. Unpleasantly true. Lyra looked at him through the fire. We also have nowhere to go, she said simply. At least most of us. After the slave traders, there is no home, no money, no documents. No one is waiting for us anywhere. If we scatter through the forest, some of us will not live to next week. Silence. What are you suggesting? Kai asked. Nothing, she answered. I am simply putting the facts on the table. He looked at them one by one. Horus is a fighter, experienced, useful. Selt is a head, knows how to work with documents and numbers. Very useful. Lyra is a trader, knows markets and cities. Strategically useful. He had been a soldier, then the best sword in history, but never a builder. He had never created anything from scratch. He had always been given either an order or an enemy. Now he had neither one nor the other. Only 12 people around the fire who had nowhere to go. In a world that had changed over 100 years, a world that he needed to understand anew, to return to take a place in it. Not the place of a servant or a mercenary, but a real place. He slowly stood up. I need names. Of everyone here. Why? Cautiously asked one of those he did not yet know. Because if you are coming with me, I must know who you are. He swept his gaze over everyone. You are not obliged. You may leave. But if you stay, this is not gratitude and not debt. This is a choice. And I want to know the names of those who chose. Lyra was the first to say, Lyra Solt. Then Horus. Then Selt. Then, one by one, the others. 8 women, 5 men of different ages, 1 boy named Run, who looked at Kai with huge eyes and did not blink. The last to give her name was the teenage girl who had been silent the whole time. Quietly, almost inaudibly, Nea. Good, Kai said. He did not yet know what exactly he was building, but he already knew who to begin with. The road to the nearest city took 4 days. Not 2 and not 3, because they were traveling with children, with wounded people, and with the need to avoid open roads. On the 3rd day, the rain grew stronger, the boy Rin caught a cold, and they lost almost half a day while Lyra found something like an herbal mixture in the seized supplies. Kai walked first and last alternately. At first this irritated him. He was used to a different pace, used to walking as he needed, not as a group of 13 assorted people in a wet forest could. Then the irritation passed, because he began to observe. Horus moved well for his build, kept formation, did not whine. A commander of a small combat group could come out of him if directed properly. Selt was cautious, quietly keeping notes in a little book he had taken from somewhere. He noticed details of the trail, tracks, markings on trees, and made notes. An analyst. Lyra organized the transitions better than Kai could have expected. Without orders, without pressure, she simply said the right things at the right time. The others also showed traits. One of the women, Daria, turned out to be a skilled healer. Another, Nora, knew how to cook from the minimum. The silent Nea unexpectedly showed the ability to move through the forest almost soundlessly. Kai remembered everything. That was also a reflex. An old military reflex, to look at people as resources, not in a cruel sense, but in a practical one. To understand who is capable of what, where to place them, what to rely on. The city was called Durash. Provincial, small, with stone gates and wooden houses. A trade crossroads for 3 roads, a market day once a week, an inn, a forge, 2 taverns. They entered at dawn. Kai found coins in the supplies from the captured camp. Not many, but enough to take several rooms and food. While the others settled in, he sat with Lyra and Selt in the corner of the lower hall of the tavern. Tell me, he said, everything you know about the current structure. He listened for a long time, interrupted rarely, only when it was necessary to clarify a term or name that told him nothing. The Empire of the Sun no longer existed. He had, in general, already assumed this. 100 years is no small period, and even strong states fall apart faster. Instead of a single empire, there now existed the 7 domains, not fully independent, not fully allied. Something like a federation, held together by a common trade system and the Council of Domains, which sat in the free city of Asarn on neutral territory. Military power was distributed unevenly. 3 northern domains maintained large armies. 2 southern ones maintained trade fleets and mercenaries. The two central ones, precisely the region where Kai was now, were poorer, weaker, and politically fragmented. Here, in the central domains, the gray zone thrived. Slave trading, petty banditry, unregistered guilds, disputed territories where laws either did not exist or were not obeyed. Guilds? Kai asked again. Yes. Salt took out his book. The main legal structure for independent activity. Trade, combat, reconnaissance, craft. To work legally, registration is needed. How is it arranged? Salt nodded. Depends on the domain. But in general, there are 3 levels. A small guild patent, a medium patent, and a full patent. Small is the easiest. Registration in the city administration, minimum fee, list of members, charter. How much does it cost? The minimum fee is 200 silver marks. That is not a small amount. Not a small amount is putting it mildly, Lyra added. That is the price of a decent horse or a small shop. Kai stared at the table. 200 silver marks. He had about 8 in his hands. What does registration give? The right to legally accept contracts. The right to protection by law. The possibility to open an account in a banking house. Access to the information networks of other registered guilds. And most importantly, Selt paused. Without registration, you can be arrested as illegal mercenaries or a criminal group. Understood. Kai drummed his fingers on the table. So we need money. We need money, Lyra confirmed. And a name. A name? A guild needs a title. And I need my own name, not the one that once was. A new one. Lyra looked at him. Did you lose it? Have not used it for a long time. Pause. Kai, he said. Just Kai. Surname? Not needed for now. For the next 3 days, Kai studied Durash. Not as a tourist and not as a fugitive, as a scout. He walked the streets, listened to conversations, sat in taverns, read notices on the city board by the gates. The board was interesting. There were standard notices, lost things, job offers, buying and selling. But among them were sheets with orders. A group wanted to clear an old mine of mountain rats. Payment 30 silver. Contact Overseer Hank, Northern Street. Guards needed for a trade convoy to Targan. 3 days. Payment 10 marks per person. Experienced ones preferred. Request, find and return a missing trader. Last seen at the 3 Oaks. Reward 50 silver. Kai read carefully. The convoy to Targan was too close to Shrek City. Excluded. The mine was realistic. But 30 silver would be divided by at least 2. The missing trader was potentially interesting. 50 silver was good, but missing near the 3 Oaks meant either bandits or something worse. He took all 3. The mine took half a day. There were no mountain rats there. But there were boars that had made a den in the lower tier, and Kai understood this already at the entrance by the smell and the nature of the tracks. Overseer Hank was surprised when one person came to him instead of a group. He was even more surprised when that same person returned 4 hours later with 8 boar carcasses. Hank looked at the carcasses. How? You did not say anything about boars. I thought they were rats. Turn out to be boars. If you want the carcasses, they are yours. I asked for payment according to the contract. Hank paid 30 silver and silently added 10 more, with the look of a person who did not understand how this had happened at all. The missing trader was found the next day. He was hiding from his own creditors himself, as it turned out. Kai found him in an abandoned house by the eastern wall and held exactly one conversation on the topic that it was better to come out and deal with debts than to hide and accumulate problems. The trader came out. The client paid 50 marks. Selt kept accounts with the precision of an archive clerk. In the first week, they gathered 112 silver. 200 was still far away, but the direction had been found. While the money was being gathered, Kai thought. This was his second habit after observation. Before, he had thought about battles. Now about structure. He had heard the word guild in his past life, but back then they were mostly trade associations or warrior brotherhoods needed by others. The first sword of the empire did not need a guild. But now Kai was not thinking as the first sword of the empire. He was thinking as a man building from scratch. Selt, he said one evening, you have seen from the inside how administrative structures work. Yes, provincial administration, a trading house, once a small scout guild. What makes a guild stable? Selt thought. 3 things. First, reputation. It is the slowest, but the most important. Contracts come to those who are trusted. Second, specialization. A guild that does one thing and does it well is always more valuable than one that takes on everything. Third, structure. Who is responsible for what, how decisions are made, how money is divided. The last is the most important, Lyra added, listening to the conversation. Most guilds fall apart because of money, not because of enemies. What do you suggest? Kai asked. Are you creating a guild? I am thinking about it. Pause. Then a charter is needed, Salt said. An official document for registration, and an unofficial internal one. Rules for distributing earnings, hierarchy, duties. How is money divided now? Equally among all 13, Lyra said. That is what Horus suggested, and no one objected. Equally is wrong, Kai said. Lyra raised an eyebrow. Why? Because not everyone contributes equally. Equally sounds fair, but creates an illusion of equality where there is none. Horus risks differently than Nora. Salt contributes with brains, not battle. Daria heals. Nea scouts. Then what? The basic share is the same for everyone. On top, a share for a specific contribution to a specific contract. Salt began writing something down. How much is the basic share? 20% of the total income is divided equally. The remaining 80% by tasks and roles. Guild share? 10% of the total into the fund. For development. For equipment. For emergencies. Salt looked at him. You have already thought it all through. No, I have only begun. The guild name was discussed all evening. It was unexpectedly serious. Kai had not thought it would take so much time, but it turned out that everyone present had an opinion. Horus suggested Iron Fist. Practical, understandable. Salt, free company. Neutral, without claims. Nora, something connected with the forest, because they had all come out of the forest. Lyra was silent. When she was asked directly, she answered, the name should speak of who you want to become, not of who you are now. Kai looked at the fire. Who did he want to become? Powerful? Inevitable? To return what had been? No. He thought about the boy named Ron, who was sitting at the other end of the room and chewing bread, and about the fact that a week ago this boy had been in chains in a dirty wagon. He thought about Lyra, who had started organizing people first thing. He thought about the fact that in his past life there had been no one he could entrust his back to, and that was exactly what had killed him in the end. Blade and root, he said. Silence. Blade is strength. Root is the foundation. What holds? Lyra slowly nodded. I like it. Salt wrote it down. They reached the sum of 200 silver by the end of the second week. Exactly on the day when Kai was already preparing to go to the city administration with an application for registration, Salt returned with news. Bad. There is an overseer named Vault Ryan in the Durash administration, he said, carefully closing the door. He is responsible for guild registration in the province. And he has been rejecting all new applications for the last 3 months. Why? Because he has a contract with 2 already operating guilds. Salt spoke calmly, as always, but beneath the calm there was something like anger. The Silver Clique and the Road Dogs. Both deal with guarding and small contracts in the province. Both pay Ryan so that competitors do not get registered. Is that illegal? Technically, yes. Practically, in the central domains the law is enforced exactly as much as there is no one to violate it. Kai was silent. How many people in the Silver Clique? About 40. Based in Targan. The Road Dogs? Fewer. About 25. Here, in the Durash district. Pause. There is one more thing. Speak. The Road Dogs deal with guarding, but several of their people were seen escorting slave trading convoys. A cold pause. Horus, sitting by the wall, slowly raised his head. Lyra stopped writing. Those same ones. Nea asked quietly from the corner. Possibly not directly, Salt answered. But there is a connection. Kai placed the coins back on the table. Not with irritation, just carefully. This was not simply a bureaucratic problem. This was the first real obstacle, and it had been arranged so as to strangle any new structure in the bud. Then we need another path to registration, he said. There is one. Salt opened the book again. Registration can be obtained not only through the local administration. If you find a guarantor, a registered legal entity, or a noble title, registration goes through the domain center, bypassing the local overseer. Where do we get a guarantor? That is already another question. Kai slowly stood up. We will find one. Her story came out by chance. In the 3rd week, Kai noticed that the girl disappeared in the mornings and returned by noon. Without explanations. Without questions. On the 4th time, he followed her. The forest east of Durash was old. Oaks 2 arm spans thick, mossy stones, a stream that wound as if it itself could not decide where it needed to go. Naya stood in a clearing and worked with a knife. Not with one, with 3. In turns, she threw them at a tree from a distance of 15 steps. Most hit. Not all, but most. And with each throw the technique was slightly more precise. Kai stood at the edge of the clearing and watched. She did not hear him, and that in itself said a lot. Either very focused, or not trained to notice a presence behind her back. More likely the first. "Who taught you?" he asked. She turned sharply. The knife was already in her hand, the stance instinctive, not set. "You." She exhaled. "Do not sneak up. You did not hear. That is more important." She frowned. "I taught myself. Myself. The knives were my father's." "Who was he?" "A hunter." "Just that." Without emotion. "Good base," Kai said. "But you hold the blade incorrectly for the throw. Give it." She looked at him, then held out the knife. They spent the next hour in the clearing. Kai did not explain much, not complicatedly. The angle of the wrist. The moment of release. How to read the wind. Naya was silent, listened, tried. By the end of the hour, she hit 1.7 times out of 10. "You know how to move in the forest," Kai said. "That is valuable. I just grew up in the forest. And that is why it is valuable. The guild needs such a person." She looked at him. "You are building a guild." "Yes." "Why do you need this?" She asked directly. "You could leave alone. You do not need us." "I do." "No." He stood up and picked up the knife. "The last time I was alone, I died," he said. The reason was exactly loneliness. He did not specify. She apparently decided not to ask. She simply nodded and raised her hand with the knife again. The idea was given by Lyra. Not at once. She thought about it for 2 days before saying it aloud. Kai noticed it by the way she walked around the room of the inn in the evenings and muttered something under her breath, looking over the contact list she had been keeping from the very beginning. On the 3rd day, she came to him in the morning and placed a folded sheet on the table. "Lord Essentarvis," she said. Kai unfolded the sheet. On it was written an address, an estate 2 hours' ride to the west, and several lines of biography. Who? An impoverished nobleman of the 3rd rank. He has land, a coat of arms, the right of guarantee. Almost no money left. How do you know? I am a trader. She smiled slightly. I supplied him grain and oil on credit for 3 years. He paid off the debt, but with great difficulty. The estate is decaying. The servants have been reduced to 4 people. Will he agree to the guarantee? If offered correctly, possibly. What does he get? That is the question. Lyra sat down opposite. You cannot simply buy him with money. He needs something permanent. Reputation. Or a share. Kai thought. A nobleman with the right of guarantee and no money is leverage. Not free, but working. A share in the guild? No. Lyra shook her head. That will create problems later. He will start interfering in decisions. Then what? An annual payment. Fixed. And the name of the estate in the guild documents as the official address of the guarantor. Does that give him reputation? A little. But for him, that is more important than money. Nobles live by name, not by purse. Kai nodded. We ride. The Tarbis estate looked exactly as Lyra had described. Once this had been a beautiful place. Kai saw it in the arrangement of the buildings, in the old oaks by the gates, in the shape of the once-tended garden that was now becoming overgrown. The main house held, but the tiles on the right wing had been replaced with boards, the gates creaked, and the only groom at the entrance looked at the visitors with such exhaustion that it seemed he himself was about to begin becoming overgrown. Lord Essentarvis turned out to be a man of about 60, dry, with a straight back and the look of a person accustomed to dignity that was no longer entirely supported by external circumstances. He received them in the library, the only room where it was clean and warm. Lyra spoke first. Kai was silent and observed. Tarvis listened attentively, without interrupting. When Lyra finished, he leaned back in the chair and looked at the ceiling for a long time. A new guild, he said at last. In the central domain, with 0 reputation and 13 people. Yes, Lyra answered. And you want my name in the documents. And your signature. In exchange for a fixed payment. 20 silver annually. Lyra spoke calmly. Plus our name among the suppliers of your estate. If you need guards, transport, or reconnaissance, at cost. Tarvis turned his head to Kai. And you? You are silent. I have no arguments that she has not already said, Kai answered. Are you the leader of this group? Yes. How old are you? Less than it seems. Tarvis narrowed his eyes slightly. That is not an answer. It is an honest answer. A long pause. The old nobleman looked at him as if trying to understand something that did not fit into familiar categories. A young guy with a manner of holding himself that did not match either his age or his clothes, or the fact that he had just offered a business deal as if he had done it 1,000 times. "You are a warrior," Tarvis said. "Yes." "A good one." Pause. "Sufficient." Tarvis suddenly laughed, shortly, dryly. "Sufficient. Good." He stood up. "I need 3 days. I want to make inquiries about you. If everything matches, I will sign." 3 days, Kai agreed. They left. Lyra walked beside him, and Kai felt that she was pleased. "He will sign," she said quietly. "Are you sure?" He looked at you the way people look at something they are not yet sure about, but already want to participate in. Kai did not answer. He was thinking that 3 days were 3 days that needed to be used. On the second day, the road dogs reminded them of themselves. Not elegantly, not through intermediaries, and not through official channels. Simply 5 of their people entered the inn at the moment when Kai was sitting at breakfast and stood by the table with a look that was supposed to say, "This is our territory, and you do not know it yet." The eldest of the 5 was large, with a red beard and a scar across the bridge of his nose. His name, as Kai had already found out, was Dog, not a nickname, but a real name, and that in itself said a lot. "Heard you were taking contracts," Dog said without greeting. "Heard correctly. Without registration. For now does not work here." He put his hand on the table. "In the Jarash district, contracts are taken only through us or through the Silver Clique." "Interesting. Where is that written?" "Nowhere. I am saying it." Kai chewed bread. "You can say anything you want," he said calmly. "That does not make it true." Dog looked at him, then looked at the rest of his people as if reminding him, "There are 5 of us." "Boy," he said with an unpleasant smile, "you seem not to understand where you have ended up." "I understand," Kai answered. "I am in a tavern, eating bread, and you are interfering." Dog twitched. It was predictable. Kai saw it a second before he began moving. He read the tension in the shoulders, the angle of the torso, the character of the breathing. He rose from the table before Dog had time to turn around. Not quickly, simply exactly on time. A grip on the wrist, a step to the side, use of inertia. Dog, to his own surprise, hit his face on his own table, not painfully, but humiliatingly enough. 2 of the others stepped forward. Horace and Nea came out of the back room. She appeared earlier, soundlessly, with a knife on her belt. Horace simply stood by the wall, folded his arms on his chest, and looked at the 5 road dogs with the expression of a person who was used to this. The paws stretched. Dog straightened up, rubbed his nose, looked at Kai with a different expression now, without mockery, but with something worse, the interest of a predator that had met an obstacle. "Good," he said quietly. "We will talk differently." "Always ready," Kai answered. They left. Horace followed them with his eyes. "They will come back." "Yes. With more people. Probably." "You are not afraid?" Kai sat back down and took the bread. "No. But we need to speed up." Tarvis sent an answer on the 3rd day. A short note. "Come tomorrow morning." That was a good sign. People who refuse usually say it differently. But before going, Kai gathered all 13. It was the first real conversation of the whole group. Not by a fire in the forest, not in haste, but at a large table in the lower hall of the tavern, with food, with paper, and with the understanding that everything would be different next. "We need to talk about who we will be," he began. "Not tomorrow. In general." The faces around were different, attentive, cautious, tired. Horace looked straight ahead. Selt held a quill ready. Daria nervously folded her hands. Rin chewed bread and listened the way children listen, with full, unfiltered concentration. "A guild is not simply permission to take contracts," Kai continued. "It is a structure. A structure has rules. Rules protect the people inside, and let the people outside understand what to expect from you." "What rules?" Daria asked. "First," he raised one finger, "no one takes a contract alone without coordination, even a small one. I must know who does what." "Why?" "Because the road dogs or the Silver Clique may use a loner as an entry point. One person is weaker than a system." No one objected. "Second, money goes into the common fund. Distribution according to the scheme Selt explained. No personal deals behind the group's back. And if someone offers us something personally," asked one of the men, Thorn, a former soldier. If personally, you refuse or report it. This is not punishment, this is protection. Kai looked at him. In my practice, people who take money behind their own people's backs sooner or later take money against their own people too. Thor nodded, not with joy, but without objections. Third, we do not work with slave traders, neither directly nor indirectly, under no pretext. Silence. This rule required no explanation. 12 of the 13 people in the room had once been in chains themselves. Fourth, everyone is responsible for their role. Horus, combat unit. Selt, documents and finances. Lyra, contracts and connections. Daria, medicine. Nea, reconnaissance. The others at discretion. And you? Nea asked quietly. I make the decisions that no one else has made. It sounded sharper than he had intended, but no one laughed. Fifth, Kai added. If someone wants to leave, they leave freely, without debts and without resentment. This is not a prison. Lyra looked at him. And you? Will you stay? He looked at her. I stay. It was an honest answer. For the first time in a long time, he was giving an honest answer to a question about the future. Because for the first time in a long time, the future looked like something worth going toward. Tarvis signed. Not quickly. He read the document for a long time. Asked Selt questions about legal wording, once asked to change a clause about the guarantor's right to interfere in operations. I do not want interference, Kai said directly. I also do not want to interfere, Tarvis answered. But the document must say that this is my decision, not a restriction. Kai understood. Noble dignity is also a tool. It must be respected. Good. Selt rewrote the clause in 5 minutes. Tarvis put his signature and seal. Kai held the document in his hands for several seconds. Paper. Old, with a watermark, with the embossed coat of arms of the Tarvis estate in the corner. Several lines of text, signature, seal. Nothing special. And at the same time a foundation. When will you submit it to the domain center? Tarvis asked. Tomorrow. Long to wait for an answer? Selt answered. Usually 2 weeks. If everything is in order. And if it is not in order? Then we will know exactly who is interfering, Kai said. Tarvis looked at him attentively. You already have enemies now? The road dogs and the Silver Clique. I know them. The old nobleman grimaced slightly. The Silver Clique works with people from the northern domain. Not the most pleasant connections. Is there something worth knowing about them? Tarvis was silent for a moment. Their commander is Grand Selvies. Hard, smart, without principles. He will not fight you directly while you are small. But if you begin to grow, he will find a way to stop you. Not by force. Through connections. Through corrupt officials. Through everything available. Thank you for the warning. Tarvis stood up and extended his hand. Kai shook it. Good luck, said the old nobleman. The central domains have not seen an interesting guild in about 20 years. Kai almost smiled. We will try to fix that. The domain center was located in Helga, a city twice the size of Durash, with stone pavements, with a banking house, with 3 inns of different levels, and with an administrative quarter that occupied an entire block in the center. Kai came there with Selt. Not with everyone. That was impractical. For a trip to the administration, a head was needed, not strength. In the administrative building, Selt turned into another person. Not nervous and not fussy. On the contrary, he became quiet, precise, and very professional. He spoke briefly, used the right terms, knew which office to go to immediately, and which only after the 3rd one. The registration department was on the 2nd floor. Behind the counter sat a young clerk with the look of a person who knew all the reasons for refusal too well. Application for a small guild patent, Selt said, placing the package of documents on the counter. The clerk took the package, began leafing through it, reached Tarvis's signature. Pause. Guarantor Lord Tarvis? Yes. 3rd rank, Western Subdomain. Everything is correct. The clerk leafed further. Guild charter. List of members. Financial confirmation of the fee. Kai silently stood by the wall and observed. The clerk reached the last page and raised his head. Everything is in order with the documents. But I have a question. Please, Selt said. Did you submit an application through the local Durash administration? No. We are submitting directly, through a guarantor with the right of direct registration. The clerk studied him. Overseer Ryan did not give approval. Approval from the overseer is not mandatory if there is a guarantor of the 3rd rank and above. Article 18, Paragraph 3 of the regulations on the guild structure of the central domain edition of the 114th year. A long pause. The clerk looked at the documents again. Then at Selt. Did you work in administration? I have experience. Another pause. Then the clerk put an incoming stamp. Review 14 working days. The answer to the guarantor's address or to the address indicated in the documents. Thank you. They went out. On the street, Selt finally exhaled. He wanted to refuse, he said quietly. I know. But he could not. Ryan managed to warn through his channels. The clerk knew about us in advance, and still could not refuse. Because the documents were correct, Kai answered. You work well. Selt was silent for a moment. I simply know the rules better than those who abuse them. That is good work. The waiting was working. Kai did not know how to wait passively. This remained from his first life, when space without movement meant space that someone was using against you. He used the 14 days densely. First, training. His own body had to be raised systematically. Kai built a daily routine, not harsh, but consistent. In the morning, basics, from the beginning, as if he were learning from scratch. Balance, acceleration, precision. In the evening, specifics. Work with the sword, adaptation of reflexes to the new body. Progress was visible already after a week. The body grew faster than that of an ordinary 17-year-old, as if the inner flow accelerated physical adaptation. The reflexes that had been dulled in the first days began to return. Not at full strength, but that was a matter of time. Second, training the group. Horace was good as a fighter, but only solo. He did not know how to work in a pair or trio, as most mercenaries do not, accustomed to the contract one guard, one merchant. Kai set him fights in pairs. With Thorn, with one of the other men named Hess. He explained very little, he showed. This worked faster than words. Nea developed reconnaissance. She already moved well in the forest. Now Kai added tasks for shadowing in an urban environment. Other angles, other distances, the ability to blend into the flow of people. Daria recorded medical supplies, made a list of what needed to be purchased at the first opportunity. Selt worked with documents, studied local legislation, looked for precedents, prepared templates for possible contracts. Third, contacts. Lyra worked with Helga the way only an experienced trader can, quietly, through personal meetings, through conversations over food and coffee. She got acquainted with other traders, with minor officials, with owners of inns. Information is a commodity, she explained to Nea, whom she took with her to one of those meetings. And like any commodity, it has value only if you know who to buy it from and who to sell it to. Nea listened attentively. By the end of the first week, Lyra knew. In Helga there was a merchant who was looking for guards for a route south, and there was a city councilor who wanted to solve the problem of increasingly frequent thefts at warehouses. Both contracts were potentially theirs, if the patent came. On the 9th day, the road dogs paid a second visit. Not to the tavern, to the road. Kai was returning from morning training outside the city when they appeared from around the bend. 7 people this time. Dog was the senior again. Let us talk without witnesses, Dog said. Kai stopped. He looked over the 7. More organized than last time. The positioning was better. 2 immediately moved behind his back. Dog had taught them something after the first meeting. Speak. You submitted documents to the domain center. Yes. Through Tarvis. Yes. Dog nodded not maliciously, almost thoughtfully. Smart, he said. I did not expect it. You should have expected it. Should have. He stepped a little closer. But understand me correctly. Even if they give you a patent, that does not mean there will be a place for you in the Darash district. There is always a place. Not always. For those who know how to work, always. Dog looked at him for a long time. You are very confident in yourself. No, I am confident in my people. This was not just an answer to pressure. It was the truth. In 9 days, he had seen how the group was changing. Horace trained, as if making up for everything missed in all the previous years. Selt did not sleep at night, studying laws. Lyra built a network of contacts with that quiet energy that moves mountains without noise. The road dogs needed a demonstration of weakness. Some doubts, a retreat, an attempt to negotiate. Kai gave none of that. He simply stood. Get out of the road, he said at last. I have no time for conversations that lead nowhere. Dog looked for another second, then moved aside. Not out of fear, out of calculation. That was worse, because a calculating opponent is more dangerous than an angry one. Kai passed by and did not look back. Selt found it on the 11th day. He came to Kai late at night, when the inn had already grown quiet, and placed 3 sheets with numbers on the table. Look at this. Kai looked. Numbers had never particularly interested him, but he knew how to read structures, and this was exactly a structure. Explain. The Silver Clique receives contracts from 2 sources, Selt began. The first, open applications, as usual. The second, closed ones, through an intermediary in the trading house and in Sons. And this trading house legally belongs to one person, but is actually affiliated with several noble families of the Northern Domain. One of them is House Kelver. Kai waited. House Kelver owned several transport routes through the Central Domains 20 years ago. Then the routes passed into private hands. But the passage fee through these routes still goes to House Kelver through an intermediary in the trading house. That is a gray scheme, Kai said. Dark gray. On the edge, but formally it does not violate the law. Selt pointed to the 3rd sheet. This violates it. What exactly? The Silver Clique received payment for guarding several convoys in the last 6 months. The convoys are registered as trade, grain, metal, fabrics. But the routes do not match the trade routes. They go through closed sections that officially do not exist. Slave trading. I cannot prove it directly, but indirectly, yes. Kai looked at the numbers. This was a weapon. Not with a sword, not with a knife. This was paper that, with proper use, could do what 20 people in battle could not do. Where did you get these data? Public records of the trading house. Part through the general register. Part Lyra helped. She knew some of the intermediaries personally from her old work. Selt, Kai said, do you understand what this means? Yes. It means that if we use these data incorrectly or too early, they will destroy us. Pause. But if correctly and at the right moment, this can remove the Silver Clique from the field. Not now. No, not now. This is stored. Keep it with you. No one for now. Understood. Selt put the sheets away. Kai looked into the darkness outside the window. The first life had taught him many things. But the main thing was that the strongest fortresses are not taken by storm. They are taken by siege. Slowly, patiently, with the understanding that the citadel will fall when what holds it from within runs out. The answer came on the 13th day, not in the form of an official document at first, but in the form of a courier from Tarvis, who arrived early in the morning and delivered a short note. Your patent has been approved. The documents are with me. Come today. Tarvis. Kai read it twice. Not because he did not understand, because the first time he read too quickly. Then he stood up, dressed, and went to wake the others. He did not shout and did not announce it solemnly, simply entered each room in turn and said, "We are going to Tarvis. Everything is fine." That was enough. Tarvis met them at the gates of the estate. This time the gates creaked less. Someone had oiled the hinges. Maybe a coincidence. He held in his hands a dense document with several seals, with a red ribbon of the official archive imprint. He handed it to Kai. "Congratulations," said the old nobleman. "The Blade and Root Guild. Small guild patent, central domain, registration date of this day." Kai took the document. Selt, standing beside him, almost imperceptibly exhaled. Lyra looked at the seal with the expression of a person who very much wanted to smile, but was holding back. Horus simply nodded shortly, in his own way. Nea stood aside and looked at Kai as if wanting to understand what he felt. Kai looked at the document. It was paper, just paper, but it meant a right. The right to work legally. The right to accept contracts. The right to defend themselves through law. The right to grow. "What now?" asked Ren, the boy who had been standing quietly beside Daria all this time. Kai looked at him. "Now we work," he said. The first official contract of the Blade and Root Guild was modest. Guarding the warehouse of one of the Helga merchants, the one Lyra had spoken about, for 3 nights while he waited for the arrival of his own team from the Southern Domain. Payment 20 silver. Not much, but it was an official contract, with seals, with signatures, registered in the register. The first, Horus took Thorn and Hess. 3 nights, 3 shifts. Without incidents, without violations. On the 4th day, the merchant sent payment and a short note. Work completed cleanly. I recommend. A recommendation is also a resource, especially in the beginning. Lyra was already working on the second contract, the counselor and his warehouses. The negotiations took 2 days because the counselor was cautious and wanted to understand who he was dealing with. Kai came to one of the meetings. Not to speak, to be seen. That was also calculation. The face of a guild is not a document and not a reputation. The face of a guild is a specific person whom people remember. The counselor looked at him, asked several questions about methods of work, received short, precise answers, and signed. They had worked 2 weeks after registration when Naya brought news. Not urgent, but important. People in the city are talking about us, she said during the evening conversation. What exactly? Kai asked. That a new guild has appeared. Small, but it takes contracts that used to go to the road dogs. And that the Silver Clique was interested in who stood behind Tarvis's patent. That was predictable. Grand Selvies? Kai asked. His man came to Helga, asked questions in the administration. Kai nodded. Let him be interested. We are doing nothing illegal. For now, Selt added quietly. For now is also enough, Kai answered. We need 3 more contracts. Good ones, with recommendations. Then expansion. Where to expand? Lyra asked. He looked at the map that Selt had hung on the wall. South of Durash, there are 4 villages without protection and without guards. Permanent security contracts are stable income. Small, but regular. Villages do not pay much. Villages pay with products, information, and loyalty, Kai answered. Money is not the only currency. Lyra looked at him. You think like a politician. I think like a person who intends to stay here for a long time, he answered simply. At night, when everyone was asleep, Kai went out of the city. Not because of alarm and not on business. Simply because sometimes he needed space where there was no one and nothing except darkness and silence. He found a clearing in the forest similar to the one where he had first found himself in this body and stopped. Took out the sword. No longer cheap, a good one, bought in Helga with part of the first earnings. Not ideal, but honest. Kai ran his hand along the blade. Then began. Not like in a manual, not like in a duel. Slowly, precisely, each movement separately, each transition deliberately. This was an old practice from his first life. On such nights he would go away alone and work not with an enemy, but with space. Checked where the body obeyed, where it did not. The body obeyed better. Much better than 3 weeks ago. The inner flow was becoming more stable, as if something was gradually coming into resonance between spirit and flesh. Kai felt it not through strength, but through precision. The sword went where he wanted, without a gap between thought and action. This is good, but there was something else. Something new, which had not existed in his first life. He had noticed it in the last few days, a sensation difficult to describe in words, as if the space around him had become a little more readable. Not in the usual sense, not like a tactician reads a battlefield. Deeper, as if in the air between people there was something, not invisible threads, that would be too beautiful, rather temperature. Intention, readiness for movement. He stopped, stood motionless for several minutes, then raised his hand and slowly directed the sword toward the nearest tree. Felt it. Not magic in the usual understanding. Simply amplification. As if the inner flow had become slightly more concentrated at the point of contact between the blade and the air. He struck. The blade entered the tree 3 fingers deeper than it should have with such effort. Kai looked at it. This is interesting. This is very interesting. In his first life, the inner flow had only been a skill, precision, speed, reading battle. In this life, judging by everything, it was becoming something else. Perhaps this is the difference between the life of an ordinary fighter and a life lived twice. Perhaps a spirit that has survived death carries within itself something greater than just memory. He pulled the sword out of the tree, put it into the sheath, looked at the night sky for a long time, then turned and went back to the people. Everything else later. First the guild. The southern village was called Solt. Not a random coincidence with Lyra's surname. She herself was from there, as it turned out during the very first conversation, although she had not spoken about it before. The village was small, 80 houses, fields, a small mill by the stream. They lived modestly, without wealth and without poverty, until 2 months ago a group of marauders appeared in the district, the remnants of one of the disbanded mercenary detachments, who now lived at the expense of the weak. They took grain, sometimes livestock. Once they beat the miller. The village head, a sturdy elderly peasant named Star, received Kai and Horace warily. We cannot pay much. We know, Kai said. 1 month of protection. Free. Star looked at him. Why? So you can see how we work. If it suits you, we will agree on a permanent basis. If not, we will part without resentment. And if it does not suit you, then we will leave, and you will know that you tried. Star thought for a long time, then nodded. A month. The marauders appeared on the third day. There were 7 of them, exactly the group people had spoken about in the village. Former soldiers, accustomed to being feared. They rode horses with the look of people who had done this many times already and had never once met resistance. At the entrance to the village, Kai met them. Alone, he stood in the middle of the road and looked at them. The senior marauder, a man with an axe on his back, pulled the reins. Out of the road. No. What? The village is under protection. Turn around. They exchanged glances with that mixture of anger and confusion people accustomed to easy prey have when something suddenly gets in the way. Are you here alone? Enough for you. This was not boasting. It was an exact assessment. Horace, Thorn, and Hess stood behind the houses on the sides. Kai saw their positions. Nea was on the roof of the outermost house, with a bow she had begun mastering 2 weeks ago. But most importantly, he saw these 7, and knew that with former soldiers like these, there was only one kind of conversation. The senior marauder got off his horse. That was a mistake. On foot he was slower. Kai let him take 3 steps. Then he began moving. This was the first real fight with several opponents in the new body, not the chaos in the slave traders' camp, where one could rely on confusion, but a real clash, where each of the 7 understood what he was doing. And in this fight, what had changed truly showed itself for the first time. The inner flow was not merely active, it pulsed. Every movement of the opponent was read in advance, not by a second, but by a very small half-second, a quarter, but that was enough. The first fell from a hilt strike to the temple. The second lost his sword and received a knee to the stomach. The third came from behind. Kai felt it before he heard it, turned and set a block in motion, without stopping. Horace came out from behind a house and took 2 upon himself. Thorn took 1. Nea shot, missed by half a meter, but the arrow passed close enough to the senior marauder's face that he stopped and raised his hands. Everything ended in 3 minutes. No one died. The marauders were tied up, the horses were taken as compensation, the people were sent on foot toward the nearest city with a recommendation not to return. Star stood by the road and watched this, then slowly said, "How much do you want for permanent protection?" Not everything went smoothly. In the 4th week, Thorn came to Kai and said he was leaving. Why? Kai asked. I was offered a place in the Silver Clique. Pause. Kai looked at him. They contacted you? Through an intermediary. Thorn did not look away. More money. Stable structure. A base in Targan. You understand who they work with? I know. Pause. But I have family in the north. I need money. Kai thought for a second. How much are they offering? 40 silver a month. We pay 30. Yes. Kai could have raised it. There was not much money, but 5 silver was not a catastrophe. He did not raise it. Not because he was stingy. Because he understood. A person held only by money will leave for the next one who offers more. That is not reliability. That is a transaction. You are free, he said. Without debts. Thorn looked slightly surprised. Apparently he had expected persuasion. Seriously? I said from the first day, whoever wants to leave leaves. Kai stood up and shook his hand. Good luck. After Thorn left, Kai sat alone. The first loss. Small, but it said something important. The Silver Clique had begun actively working against them. Not crudely, subtly. Through people, through money, through temptation. This was a serious opponent, and it still had not seen the full strength of blade and root. That evening, Kai gathered all those remaining. 12 people. Thorn left for the Silver Clique, he said directly. This is their work, to lure people away. There will be more attempts. What should we do? Daria asked. Decide for yourselves why you are here. He looked at each of them in turn. I cannot compete with their money right now. We are small, starting from 0. That is a fact. Pause. But I can offer something else. What? Horace asked. Participation. Not just work by order. This guild is being built by you, not for you, and not by me. When we grow, it will be yours just as much as mine. Silence. Horace asked, You believe we will grow? Kai looked at him. Yes. Why? Because I have seen large structures collapse. He spoke quietly, but very clearly. And I know why they collapse. We will not make the same mistakes. This was not a fiery monologue. Just words. But Lyra would later say that it was at that very moment she understood definitively. This man was not building a guild. He was building something greater. And, perhaps, he himself did not yet know exactly what. The morning after registration, Kai received not congratulations, but a problem. The problem looked like a man in an expensive cloak, with the seal of the Domain Council on his chest and 3 guards behind his back. He entered their headquarters, a former warehouse they had rented as a temporary guild premises, without knocking and without a smile. "Kai, head of the Blade and Root Guild," he said dryly. "I am Varn Delmer, Inspector of Domain Licenses. Your patent is valid, but your guild has been placed on the list for additional inspection." Lyra stood by the table and did not even blink. Selt, who had long since understood what real bureaucracy was, immediately raised his head. "On what grounds?" he asked. Varn shifted his gaze to him. "A request was submitted by 2 registered guilds that believe your activity violates the local balance of contracts. The Silver Clique and the Road Dogs," Kai said quietly. Varn did not answer, and that was an answer. "What exactly do they claim?" Lyra asked. "That you are luring away their clients, lowering the price of guard services, and acting outside the territorial boundaries of the established contractual structure." Kai slowly pushed back his chair and stood up. "They call it a contractual structure when they decide themselves who has the right to work?" The inspector looked at him coldly. "I do not discuss the motives of applicants. I check the compliance of documents and activity." "And what will you check?" "Your contracts, financial report, list of members, hiring methods, and guarantor chain." Selt exhaled almost inaudibly. This was the first official strike. Not with swords. With a seal. The inspection lasted 4 days. Inspector Varn turned out not to be corrupt, and that was worse than if he had been corrupt. A corrupt one can be bought. An honest one can only be convinced with facts. And Blade and Root's facts were modest, but clean. Selt prepared the documents as if he had been preparing for this all his life. Income, expenses, contract reports, lists of issued advances, fund distribution, internal rules. Varn asked uncomfortable questions. "Why is your development fund higher than average for a small guild?" Selt answered, "Because we do not spend excess on external image and temporary comforts. We invest everything in stability." "Why is a separate medical share indicated in the charter?" Daria answered herself, "Because wounds are cheaper to treat immediately, and because a guild in which people die from minor injuries does not live long." Varn wrote this down without emotion, then asked Kai, "Why is there no fixed seniority by age in your member list?" Kai answered, "Because age does not equal the ability to make decisions." "And who makes decisions?" "I do. In battle, I do. In matters of contract, Lyra and Selt. In medicine, Daria. In reconnaissance, Nea. In general matters, a council of senior members." Varn raised his gaze. "So you have already formed an internal council." "Logical," Kai said. "If a guild wants to grow, it needs structure." The inspector was silent for a moment, then asked the last question. "Do you understand that the growth of a small guild will inevitably affect the interests of the Silver Clique?" "We understand." "And you still go further?" Kai looked directly into the inspector's eyes. "Yes." Varn closed the folder. Inspection completed. No violations found. For the first time in several days, Lyra allowed herself a short, almost invisible smile. It was a small, but important victorious step. The answer came not through the council and not through the inspection. Through people. The next day, one of their contracts was disrupted. The merchant with whom Lyra had almost agreed on escorting a convoy suddenly refused and reported that he had already hired the Silver Clique. On the 3rd day, one of the village clients stated that he preferred proven strength. On the 4th, in Helga, several times in one evening, someone spread rumors that Blade and Root was a former band of slave traders hiding behind a legal patent. It was a lie, but a convenient lie. Lyra returned to the headquarters late, with a hard face. "They are striking at our reputation," she said. "I know. And not just striking. They organized shopkeepers, 2 intermediaries, and 1 scribe in the administration to push us out in the local network." Selt raised his head. "Who exactly?" Lyra placed a list on the table. "All through the same financial network." I checked. "Their main liaison here is a man named Mart Hez. He works as an intermediary between Grand Selvies and local merchants." Kai looked at the list. "Is this provable?" "Not yet. But I can prove that they are lying to clients about us." "Not enough." "I know. But it is a beginning." Kai nodded. "Then we will begin by doing one contract so cleanly that the rumors stop working." Lyra looked at him. Is there one like that? There is. He pointed to Celt's map. That very convoy to the south. Not just guarding. We need to lead it through the section where the road dogs usually recommend escort. If we lead it ourselves, that is a blow to their monopoly. Lyra slowly smiled. Finally, you are speaking like a guild head. The convoy was heavy. 7 carts, 2 wagon drivers, 1 trade wagon with documents, and 16 guards hired separately by the merchant so as not to depend completely on the guild. The merchant was named Erwin Lott, and he was the kind of person who first doubts everything, then recalculates everything, and then recalculates once more. I was told you were young, he said to Kai before departure. Is that a problem? For some, yes. For me, not yet. Good. But if you fail, I will be left with the road dogs on my tail. We will not fail. Lot looked at him attentively. Many say that. I do not say many. I say I. They departed at dawn. The route went along the lowland road, then along the forest edge, and afterward to the old stone bridge, which was the key point of the path. It was there, according to Lyra, that sudden advisors from competing guilds most often appeared. Kai walked ahead, Horus and Nea on the flanks, Lyra near the merchant, Celt beside the documents, Daria with the general medical supplies. The first day passed calmly. The second 2. On the third, by the bridge, they saw them. The road dogs. 10 people. Not for a fight, for a demonstration. Dog rode at the head. He dismounted first and, without hurrying, approached the caravan. Heard you are going without escort, he said to the merchant. Lot looked at him with irritation. I have already hired a guild. A young one. Professional enough. Dog smirked. A young guild is a risk. But we are locals. We have experience. And familiar roads. And, by the way, this bridge has been unsafe for the last 2 weeks. Kai stepped out from behind a cart. You say that like a threat. As a warning. Then I warn you in return. If you interfere with our contract one more time, I will consider it a hostile action. Dog shifted his gaze to him. You are not afraid to say such things openly? No. Why? Kai smiled barely noticeably. Because if you attack here, in front of the merchant and witnesses, it is no longer market competition. It is a license violation. Dog looked for a long time, then snorted. Smart boy. And yet, at that very moment, the first arrow flew from the opposite bank. The arrow pierced the wooden shield on the side cart. The second shot hit a horse. Then chaos began. The road dogs retreated instantly, too quickly to be accidental participants. It was staged. So the main attack was not them, but someone else. Kai saw this simultaneously with movement in the forest. Not bandits. Professionals. For figures in gray, with short bows and black armbands. Not locals. And not the road dogs. Down. He shouted. Nea was already shooting back. Horus pulled the merchant out of the line of fire and knocked him behind a cart. Celt covered the documents with himself instinctively, unreasonably, but correctly. Daria rushed to the wounded horse and, to her credit, did not panic, but immediately began bandaging the defeated wagon driver, who was clutching his shoulder. Kai rushed to the forest edge. There were not 4 opponents, but 6. They were trying not to win the fight, but to disrupt the contract and kill the merchant in order to throw the blame on the young guild. Kai understood it instantly. Someone else's game. He drew his sword and entered the shrubbery. The first archer managed to release an arrow. Kai deflected it with the blade and crashed into him with his body. The second tried to move aside, but received a hilt strike to the jaw. Then movement. Transition, shift, low stance. He felt not only their bodies, but their intentions too. That strange new layer of perception that grew stronger with each day. The third opponent was smart. He tried to come from behind. Kai did not look back. He simply stepped left before the man could strike and cut the strap of his quiver, knocking the arrows to the ground. The man was confused for exactly the second that was needed. Horus arrived from the left and knocked him down with a shoulder strike. Nea took down another from a distance. The remaining 2 tried to leave. Kai rushed after them. One stumbled over a root. Kai caught up with him and struck under the knee. The second reached the clearing, but Lyra was already standing there. With a knife. Stop, she said calmly. He stopped because there was something very unpleasant in her voice. Horus would later say that at that moment, she looked more frightening than any swordsman. Kai approached, removed the armband from the man's sleeve. There was a sign on the fabric. Not a bandit sign. A trade one. The silver clique. Lot was furious. Not because he had been attacked, he could have survived that, but because the attack attempt had been organized so as to remove a competitor and frame them. I am filing a complaint with the domain center, he barked when it was over. File it, Kai said, and not just a complaint. Tell who came first, who left, and who left this sign. Lot looked at him. You think they were from the Silver Clique? I am sure. Do you have proof? Kai raised the armband. The first proof already exists. Lot was silent, then nodded. Good. If you bring the convoy to the end, I will give you written confirmation that the road dogs tried to interfere. And some of my people also saw that the fighters in gray were not yours. That will help. I think yes. Lyra, standing nearby, quietly said to Kai, this is no longer just a monopoly. This is a war for the market. I understand. No, she looked at him. This is also a war for the right to decide who is allowed to work. Kai looked toward the forest. That seemed like the truth. And the fact that he was only beginning to understand it made everything even more dangerous. By evening, they stopped for camp. The losses were minimal. 1 horse wounded, 1 wagon driver, and 1 of the merchant's guards. No one died. That was already a victory. Kai sat by the fire and watched Daria treat the guard's shoulder. Nearby, Lyra spoke with the merchant calmly, confidently, like a person who already knew the price of the current situation. Selt sat a little to the side and wrote down witness statements. Nea cleaned arrows. Horace sharpened his sword. And suddenly Kai caught himself thinking that he was looking at all of this not as a set of people, but as a structure that had already begun to live on its own. That was good. And dangerous. Because a structure that begins to live becomes a target. Lyra came over later. What are you thinking about? That we have already attracted attention. That is obvious. No. I mean not just the attention of the road dogs and the Silver Clique. He looked at her. Someone higher up is using them. Lyra nodded. I think so too. Why? She sat down beside him. Mart Hez is not big enough a man to organize such things alone. He has someone's money. The question is whose. Kai waited. Lyra took a folded sheet from her pocket. I found something in the goods routes and old debt notes. What? She unfolded the sheet. There were several surnames on it, and one of them stood out. House Kelver. Kai looked at the name. A northern house. Nobles. Control of roads. Interests in transport chains. And if they really stood behind the Silver Clique, then everything was much more serious than local competition. This is already above Helga's level, he said quietly. Yes. Lyra folded the sheet. And that means we are no longer a small guild in the province. No. Then who are we? Kai looked into the fire, then answered, an obstacle. They returned to Helga as victors. Not loud ones, not yet. But with the contract, written confirmation from the merchant, and the first proof that the Silver Clique uses dirty methods. This was enough for the domain center to begin noticing them not as noise, but as a factor. That same evening, Varndelmer came to them. The inspector stood at the entrance to their headquarters with a new expression on his face, not cold and not suspicious, but almost thoughtful. You brought the complaint from Merchant Lot? He asked. Yes. And proof of the involvement of an external group? Yes. Varn took the papers and read quickly, then looked at Kai. You understand that this will change the attitude toward you in the administration? I hope so. This opens the possibility for you to move from a small guild to a medium patent through an accelerated path, if you show a stable flow of legal contracts and confirm the absence of violations. Lyra sharply raised her head. Selt froze. Kai slowly stood up. You are not joking? No. Varn answered evenly. But I warn you, if you receive a medium patent, resistance from the old guilds will increase. Then there will no longer be quiet attempts on deals. There will be lawsuits, blockages, provocations, and, possibly, direct violence. We have already seen that, Kai said. Varn nodded. That is exactly why I am speaking directly. You need a plan. Kai looked at Lyra, then at Selt, then at everyone else who had gathered in the room after hearing about the possibility. He understood that the next stage had begun. The small guild was no longer simply a refuge from the past. It was becoming a force, and the faster it grew, the faster the world began to respond. Varn was not exaggerating. When the news about the possible accelerated transition to a medium patent spread through the right offices, the Blade and Root Guild instantly stopped being simply a young association. It became a question, and questions in the administration are liked only when they can be influenced. The next day, Kai was summoned to the domain center, not to the clerk and not to the inspector anymore, but to a separate negotiation hall, where 3 people sat at a long table. Varn Delmer, a female lawyer named Scylla Rem, and a man with the ribbon of the domain archive on his wrist, Hars Velm, responsible for licensing medium guilds. Selt was nearby. Lyra too. This was no longer simply submitting documents. This was an interview for survival. Your indicators for the first month, Scylla began, laying out sheets, exceed the average data for a small guild by 3 criteria: contract cleanliness, level of execution, absence of complaints. Lyra did not smile, but her eyes flashed. However, the woman continued, there is also risk. Hars Velm tapped his finger on the table. A medium patent opens access to more expensive contracts, but also increases responsibility. You will be visible not only to the market, but also to major players. Any failure will become grounds for inspection. Kai sat calmly. We understand. And are you ready? Scylla asked. No, he answered. Pause. Selt threw him a quick glance. Explain, Hars said. We are not ready for pressure, Kai said. But we are ready to learn and grow. If I said otherwise, it would be a lie. Scylla slightly raised her eyebrows. An honest answer. Rare. I agree, Varn said. And that is exactly why I am for them. Hars was silent for several more seconds. You have the support of a guarantor, clean documents, completed contracts without violations, and confirmation from an external merchant about the interference of an outside structure. He looked at the papers. Formally, there are no reasons to refuse. Lyra barely noticeably clenched her fingers. Then, Hars said, if you sign the expanded charter and agree to mandatory quarterly reporting, your patent can be reviewed within 10 days. Kai nodded. We sign. The expanded charter took up 9 pages. This was no longer a simple document about who could take contracts. It was a definition of what the guild would become at the level of law. Selt read it 3 times. Lyra twice. Kai once, but very carefully. The most important changes concerned 3 things. First, a medium guild receives the right to conduct not only guard contracts, but also mixed contracts, escort, search, reconnaissance, negotiation support, clearing dangerous objects. Second, the guild is required to have an internal council, a permanent archive, and a financial officer. Third, a medium patent is followed not simply by the market, but by spheres of influence. Spheres of influence? Horus asked again when everything was explained to them. Selt nodded. Yes, this means that the old guilds will consider us competitors, not a temporary threat. So it will get worse, Nea snorted. Yes, Kai said, but there will also be more opportunities. Lyra placed her palm on the table. And this is a question not only of our name, but also of what we do. If we are known by our deeds, the name will become a brand. I do not like the word brand, Horus muttered. Me neither, Lyra said. But the meaning is clear. Kai looked at them and for the first time felt they were no longer just 13 survivors. They were turning into a system. This was what he had been looking for, and what he feared at the same time. While the documents moved through the offices, Lyra dug deeper. This was her strongest weapon, connections. She knew whom to ask, how to ask, and when to stop so that a conversation would not turn into a threat. On the 7th day, she brought Kai a thin folder. I found a link between the Silver Clique and House Kelver, she said. Kai opened the folder. There were goods routes, debt obligations, insurance records, hidden deliveries, several names that repeated in different documents, and one especially unpleasant one. The Kelver Investment Fund for the Regions of Transport Security. What is this? Kai asked. Officially, a program for road development and transport protection. Unofficially, a way to buy control over guilds in the central domains. Lyra poked the list with her finger. The Silver Clique receives part of its contracts not from the market, but from the fund. So they are not simply strong. They are financed as an instrument of influence. Selt turned pale. This is already a political level. Yes, Lyra said. And something else. She opened the last sheet. On it was the name of an intermediary. Mart Hez. He is not just a liaison, Lyra continued. He is Kelver's man. Formally independent, in fact their hand in Helga. Kai was silent, then asked, how deep does this go? Lyra looked at him very seriously. Deep enough that if we touch the Silver Clique directly, something will come down from above. Therefore, what is needed is not a strike, but a chess move. What kind? She smiled for the first time in a long time without tension. Make it so that they themselves begin to interfere not with us, but with the domain center. Lyra was a trader, and therefore understood one thing. People rarely fall from a blow, but often from their own greed. Her plan was simple, but elegant. The silver clique was too used to dictating prices for guard and escort. They charged for the brand, for reputation, for fear. If Blade and Root began offering higher quality services cheaper, it could not continue like that for long. But a direct dumping clash is suicide. So Lyra suggested something else. We do not hit them in all markets, she said at the council. We hit them where they have a weak spot, in small towns and villages, where protection is needed urgently and money is limited. And what then? Salt asked. Then we create a problem for them with contracts. Merchants will begin to see that Blade and Root is better. The silver clique will begin lowering prices to hold the market. And when they lower prices, their margin will fall. Then their financing from Kelver will begin to look like a loss. Horace smirked. Losses make the rich nervous. Exactly, Lyra said. Kai looked at the map. This means we need new routes and new points. Yes, and fast logistics. Lyra poked the points to the north and east. These villages have already asked for protection, but they do not know us yet. If we go there first, we will establish ourselves. And if the Silver Clique sends people earlier, then they will lose face if they lose the contract. Kai slowly nodded. The plan was risky, but beautiful. And most importantly, it worked not on strength, but on strategy. Do it, he said. That night, Kai went out to train alone. Because everything that was happening was good, but something else was growing inside him. The inner flow. It was changing. Not sharply, not dramatically. Gradually, like a tide. But Kai already felt it not only as amplification. Depth was appearing in it. He stood in the clearing outside the city, closed his eyes, and evened his breathing. One breath. A second. Then movement. The sword burst from its sheath and went along a trajectory he had not drawn consciously. Body and spirit were already beginning to work together on another level. Strike. Turn. Block. At that moment, he felt the flow around the blade seem to thicken. Not energy in the crudest sense, but something like the pressure of intent. The sword cut the air with such a sound as if the air resisted not the metal, but the very idea of the strike. Kai stopped, took a deep breath, repeated. This time the blade left a strangely clear arc in the air, and the nearest bush at the edge of the clearing trembled, although he had not touched it. He looked at this for a second, then smiled. So, after all, not only memory. This was important. In his past life, he had been the strongest swordsman of the Empire. In this life, he was beginning to understand that his spirit had not simply remained, it had evolved. As if rebirth had not destroyed the old strength, but reforged it. This opened a new level, and a new risk. Because if strength grows too quickly, enemies will feel it. The first step of Lyra's plan was in the village of Vane on the Eastern Road. Small, poor, but important. Rural supplies went through it to the Helga market. Local protection there practically did not work because of poverty, and for the last 2 weeks the road had been held by a gang of thieves who presented themselves as lawful collectors. Kai took half the group. Horace, Nea, Lyra, Daria, and 2 fighters. On the road, they saw tracks. Not thieves, Nea said. Why? Horace asked. Too neat. A thief moves quickly, takes what he can, and leaves. These stay on the road for a long time. So they control the section. Lyra nodded. This is a structure. Kai was silent. All the way to the village. There they were met by the local elder, a pale, tired man with a cane. If you have come to take payment for protection, he said immediately, we have no money. We have not come for payment, Kai answered. The elder looked at him distrustfully. Then why? To ask who is currently collecting duty from you. Pause. The elder nervously looked around. People in gray cloaks. 2 with documents. They say they work on behalf of road security. Lyra already guessed. The Silver Clique? The elder flinched. I do not know their name, but they take grain and money. And if someone objects, they scare them with guards. Kai looked at Nea. Where are they standing? The old barn by the road. 3 inside, 2 outside. These are no longer collectors, Lyra said quietly. This is occupation. The barn was old, but sturdy. Outside were 2 horses, 1 table, a box with papers, and 4 people, as if waiting for a new batch of collections. Kai approached first. Who is senior? He asked. One of the gray cloaks raised his gaze. Who are you? I asked first. He smirked. The locals sent a boy. Tell them if they do not pay, the road will be closed completely. The road is already closed, Kai answered. What? At that very moment, the fourth man came out of the barn with a crossbow. He did not even manage to raise it properly. Nea shot first. The crossbowman fell. The two at the table jumped up, but Horus was already beside them. Kai went to the main one, the one who had just spoken. Are you from the Silver Clique? He asked. Go to hell. Kai struck him in the stomach with the hilt, and he bent over. Again. Again. Yes, the man exhaled. Yes. Lyra came closer, took the papers from the table. That is all, she said, leafing through the documents. Temporary road security fee. Signature. Seal. Forged form. Kai looked at the captive. Who gave the order? Mart Hez. Through whom? Silence. Horus pressed slightly on the captive's shoulder. Through whom? Kai repeated. Through the warehouse inspector. In Helga. Lyra raised her head. Names. The man named them. Selt would later say that this was the first time they had obtained not just proof, but a chain. Returning to Helga, Kai understood. They could no longer remain merely at the level of response. Now they were capable of delivering strikes. And the Silver Clique understood this too. The next day, they were summoned to the domain center again, no longer as petitioners, but as a party in a conflict. Varndelmer met them at the entrance with a gloomy face. You have opponents in the council, he said immediately. Already? You are growing too fast. It frightened someone. Kai looked at him. We have proof of illegal collections in vain, a connection with Mart Hez, and interference in regional logistics. Yes, Varn answered. And that is exactly why they are already trying to stop you. Lyra frowned. Who? Varn was silent for a moment. House Kelver has made a request to review your license as a potentially destabilizing structure. Selt swore. This was already serious. On what grounds? Kai asked. The wording is standard. A new guild disrupting the established balance in a zone of increased transport sensitivity. Beautifully written, Lyra said dryly. Yes, and dangerous, Varn added. Because almost anything can be hidden in such wording. Kai looked at him. What should we do? Varn was silent for a moment, then quietly said, prove that you are not destroying the balance. Create a result that will be impossible to ignore. Lyra was the first to understand. We need a large-scale contract. Varn nodded. And quickly, the large contract came from an unexpected place. Not from Helga and not from a merchant. From the southern border fort. The garrison commander, Captain Rain Voss, was looking for escort and protection for an important cargo, not gold, not weapons, but archive boxes and grain tax, which had to be transported to the capital accounting point. Why exactly them? Because someone in the administration, apparently Varn or someone from his circle, decided to give them a chance. But the chance came with a trap. The route went through a section where the remnants of the road dogs operated and, according to rumors, agents of the Silver Clique. If they failed, their reputation would be destroyed. If they passed, the medium patent would be almost guaranteed. Kai gathered the council. This is a risk, Selt said. Yes, Lyra answered. Too big, Daria added. But if we take it and complete it, Horus said, we will become someone. Nea was silent, then said shortly, I am for it. Kai looked at everyone. Then we prepare. In the evening, Lyra held him back after the meeting. You understand that this is not just a contract? She asked. Yes. This is an attempt to determine whether we can be a player at all, and not a coincidence. I understand. She was silent for a moment. And if we pass, we will have real enemies. We already have them, but they will be stronger. I know. Lyra looked him in the eyes. Then I need to know one thing. What? Do you truly want to rise to the top? Not for strength, not for revenge, but exactly to the top. Kai was silent for a long time, then said, yes. Why? He looked out the window, where the sky over the city was already darkening. Because in my past life I was so high that I did not see how the people below suffered from what those above did. Pause. Now I want to rise again, but differently, so that this time I understand who and what pays for my strength. Lyra looked at him, not interrupting. And also, he added more quietly, because if I remain only a sword, one day I will again be killed out of fear. This was perhaps the most honest of all his answers. Lyra slowly nodded. Then I am with you. The cargo had to pass through 3 points. They took the first cleanly, the second with a fight. At the third, they were already waiting. And there Kai saw for the first time a man he would later remember for a long time. Not an enemy commander, not a mercenary, a senior official of domain logistics, who stood on the road with documents and spoke in such a tone as if all of this were his own game. Blade and root, he pronounced. Finally, Kai narrowed his eyes. Were you waiting for us? You? No. The official smiled. But your growth was predictable. Lyra took half a step forward. Who are you? Rembal Kelver. The silence became heavy. The name. Not just House Kelver, a man from there, personally. You should not be here, Selt said quietly. And yet I am here. Rembal looked at the cargo, then at Kai. Your contract intersects with the interests of my house. I have come to offer you a deal. Kai did not answer. Give up this route, and we will not hinder your development further. You will receive safe growth. A medium patent. Partnership terms. The possibility to work on northern routes. Lyra tensed. And the price? Rembal looked at Kai. No interference in the Silver Clique. No investigations into Mart HEZ. No questions about our supply chains. Kai slowly smiled. Not joyfully. You want us to become convenient. I want you to become reasonable. No, Kai said. You want us to stop being a threat. Rembal did not deny it. And that was an answer worse than any denial.